few months back, well, actually, I think it was probably about 7 or 8 months back, we had somebody come in and give a presentation on the Super Bowl that was actually from the host committee. And I was pretty impressed. I thought it was a pretty informative presentation, hearing about all the things that were kind of in the works, that we would start to see the plans come together. And so now, about a month or so ago, maybe a few weeks more than that, Peter asked me if I could give a presentation on the Super Bowl, or have someone come in and give a presentation now that we're really close to when the game is actually going to take place. And so I've been in a really fortunate position where I've gotten to kind of sit back and watch and participate in a lot of meetings, but really the people that are doing the bulk of the work to put together the safety and security plan for Super Bowl 52 are in the room here today. You're going to hear from Commander Scott Gerlicher of the Minneapolis Police Department, and I also brought Deputy Chief Mike Hartley, and he is our main contact here in Bloomington. I won't steal any of the thunder from the presentation that Commander Gerlicher is going to give you, but what I will say to kind of set the stage is, so I've been in Bloomington here, working at the Bloomington Police Department for a little over 26 years. As Deb mentioned, I've been the chief since late 2008. And prior to that, I spent about 5 or 6 years in our command staff and played a role in planning for big events that would come to Bloomington. But I can tell you, in the 26 plus years that I have been involved in law enforcement, I have never seen an event that has forced us to plan in the way that we've had to plan for Super Bowl 52. The closest thing that I can think of that I was in a small part a part of was when the RNC was here in the summer of 2008. That was a multiple day event in St. Paul, but we needed a lot of law enforcement because we knew there was likely to be protests and things like that. But even the RNC in 2008, which was a 4 or 5 day conference, in my opinion, kind of pales in comparison to what we've been doing to plan for Super Bowl 52. It is a whole lot more than just a football game on a Sunday night in February. It's a week or more of events leading up to the game. It's the teams when they come in to stay and prepare for this. It's a big deal where they stay. They're both staying in Bloomington at hotels attached to the Mall of America. And so there's all kinds of events that are taking place that week before. The world is a crazy place right now. It's gotten nothing but crazy over the last, few years. And so we've had to, and the reason this has been such a challenge for law enforcement is you have to prepare for anything. Right? We have to prepare for a Super Bowl that goes off very smoothly. It's just a football game on Sunday night with a bunch of people in town. We got to plan for somebody coming into town to, maybe just get 200,000 likes on Facebook or be the next viral video doing something crazy. That's really not criminal, but it's just somebody doing something bizarre that happens in front of one of our officers, all the way up to planning for the unlikely event, we hope it never happens, but being planned for if terrorism visits this particular region during the Super Bowl. And so we've been doing nothing but plan for several months, about 18 months. Commander Gerlicher, if you want to come on up here, he has been the person, like I said, responsible for leading the Super Bowl readiness with the city of Minneapolis, 29-year veteran of the Minneapolis Police Department. I've known Scott for several years, but I can tell you that as the chief out here in Bloomington and watching what's going on in terms of getting the law enforcement community ready for Super Bowl 52, Commander Gerlicher has done a great job in leading that charge. I've been very impressed with the work of their department, about how eager they are to roll their sleeves up and work with all of us out in the suburbs. Frankly, they need us and we need them to pull this off. There's not enough police officers in any one city to pull this off, and so we really have had to do kind of a team effort to pull this thing off. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Commander Gerlicher, and hopefully at the end there will be time for some questions, at which time I'll invite Deputy Chief Hartley up here, and he may be able to respond directly to the stuff going on here in Bloomington. So,
great, thanks.
Commander Gerlicher?
Yeah. Thank you. I do have a mic. I'll try to speak up. I got a little bit of a mic here. So thanks for being here and having the opportunity to talk to all of you. As the chief said, this has been a big project for dozens and dozens of public safety officials for 2 years now. And yes, we are 27 days from the game, but it's been a long time coming. Frankly, I wish the 27 days were over with, it was done. But we are ready, and I go to sleep every night very comfortably. We have an incredible public safety team. When we talk about the Super Bowl, as the chief mentioned, it's not the Minneapolis Super Bowl, this is the Minnesota Super Bowl, and we really have created a Minnesota law enforcement partnership, as you'll see in just a minute. And it really is a metro-wide effort as it relates to the public safety operations. So I'll have Chief kind of advance the slides. We're no stranger to big events. We had a little warm-up this past July with the X Games at US Bank Stadium. We have the Super Bowl, X Games next summer, and then in April 2019, the NCAA Men's Final Four. So we're going to spend most of our time today talking about the Super Bowl, but there's a lot of things going on in our area, not just downtown, but everywhere. So here's some facts about the Super Bowl. Some of this you may know, some you may not. So it really is a true 10-day festival. It's not just a one-day festival. It's going on from really Saturday, January 27th, all the way through February 4th. 10 full days of activation of activities and 10 full days of public safety activation throughout the metro area. Yes, 1 million guests. That's 1 million people coming and going, some of those obviously being local residents like all of you, others coming in from all over the world to see the Super Bowl or partake in the festivities. Some other facts up there. 10,000 volunteers. I don't know if any of you are a part of Crew 52. There you go. So you may have seen me before. And we are now in the process of doing training literally as we speak with those 10,000 volunteers on things like what to look for, terrorism prevention, etc. So it's a big deal. It's a SEER Level 1 event. I'll talk about that a little bit later. But really, it's the biggest party in the world. Go ahead and move ahead. This just gives you a feel for what's some of the major events. Again, team hotels, they're really here for a week. We'll talk more about the Vikings and what that might mean. But generally, the teams check in on Sunday prior to the Super Bowl, and they're here all week doing practices, media events. You have the headquarters hotel downtown Minneapolis, Super Bowl Experience and Super Bowl Live, both downtown Minneapolis. I'll show you some renderings of that and on all these other events. So as we talk about this, the public safety operation that we've put into place, which involves 3,000 public safety officials, both at the local, state, federal level, and Minnesota National Guard, are covering all of these Super Bowl events and venues. Considering the MPD has 870 total police officers, and we're talking about 3,000 in Bloomington, what do you have? 125? And we all still have cities to run. So we can't just take everybody and say, hey, neighbors, you're on your own, we'll just cover the Super Bowl. So we have had to reach out to partners from all over the state, and I'll talk about that more in just a moment. So Super Bowl Live, this is going to be the most popular and well-attended event in the entire Super Bowl. It's 10 full days. You've seen it on TV now being advertised along Nicollet Mall from 6th Street to 12th Street. It's no fee or no ticket to get in there, and all sorts of interactive events and bars and whatnot taking place. Over that 10 days, there could be 1 million people that just come to town to see that event. A lot of people come in that don't have Super Bowl tickets, but they just want to be part of this festival atmosphere, and it will be a festival atmosphere. So that's in downtown Minneapolis. Go ahead. This just gives you, it's a little hard to see, but so you have Super Bowl Live on Nicollet, you have the Super Bowl Experience, which I'll talk more about at the Convention Center, and then the game over at US Bank Stadium. So we have a lot of things crammed into downtown Minneapolis, and there's a lot of challenges with that for the people that are setting that up, as well as for public safety. Go ahead. So Super Bowl Live, this is one of the features of Super Bowl Live. This is the old Macy's building or Dayton's building. That's kind of a rendering of the sound stage they'll be building, and they'll have artists coming in and giving concerts every night during that Super Bowl period of time. Road closures as it relates to Super Bowl Live. And there's a great document online if you haven't seen it, if any, because I get a ton of questions about that. mnsuperbowl.com, transportation. This document is, as well as other road closures, and that'll continually be updated. So if you want to come downtown or you want to know about road closures that may be affecting Bloomington, Mall of America, or downtown Minneapolis, this is just an excerpt from one of these. You see the red line indicates road closures along Nicollet Mall, and then the yellow would indicate cross-street lane restrictions in that particular area. Go ahead. All right, Super Bowl Experience. This is really a family-friendly event, about $30, $45 ticket. A lot of kids coming in there as well. 10 days, starting January 26th, going through February 3rd, the day before the Super Bowl. There's going to be a perimeter set up around the convention center, and it's a hardened perimeter, just as it will be around the stadium. So security is very tight, but that's a very fun event. I think I have a picture of what that looks like. Yes, this is from previous. They have all sorts of programming in here. The Lombardi Trophy is displayed. A very fun event. Next. And this just gives you a feel for the convention center and some of the road closures, again, around there. So there's a misnomer that the entire downtown Minneapolis is going to be shut down. That is not true. The road closures I'm showing you really are the road closures. Another rumor was that you need like an ID and you're going to be screened entering anywhere into downtown Minneapolis. Another not true rumor. If you're going into here or into the stadium, yes, you will be screened, have to go through magnetometers. But the rest of downtown is open for business. Opening night is another event. That's on Monday night, January 29th, and that's over at St. Paul at the Excel Center. And that's where both teams come in. They're grilled up by members of the media. They have a little concert. So as you start to see, as we start to talk about these events, it truly is a metro-wide effort. Here's the Mall of America overhead. And this is going to be a very big hub of activity. You have the two hotels, the AFC team hotel at the Marriott and the NFC team hotel down there at the Radisson Blu. A lot of activities in the media center, also inside the Mall of America itself. And then on game day, in that ramp over there is a security checkpoint, and we'll have, as you might have read about in the newspaper, ticket holders will be able to take the light rail train nonstop directly from that facility into the stadium perimeter without having to go through another perimeter check when they get in there. So Mall of America certainly will be a hub of activity that entire 10 days. All right, so talking a little bit about the planning process and how do you get ready for a Super Bowl? Well, we talked with these places, Arizona, talked with them in 2015, and then myself and some others went to Santa Clara and San Francisco for Super Bowl 50. And then this past February, these gentlemen, myself, and several others also went to Houston. So the good part of this job is that I got to go to the last two Super Bowls. Unfortunately, now it's on us to do it, right? But we did learn a lot. So much of how we planned our process really is not that different than how other cities have done it. What is different is our area, our community, our weather. A lot of things are different, but as much of the planning process is pretty consistent year to year. So this is what they call a SEER Level 1 event. Department of Homeland Security has a special event assessment rating, or SEER level, established to all events, whether that be smaller events like the Minneapolis Aquatennial Parade, all the way up to presidential inauguration and to things like the Super Bowl. SEER Level 1 being the highest security level an event. As established by comparison, the Ryder Cup was a SEER Level 3 event, as was the All-Star Game in 2014. What that means by virtue of it being a SEER Level 1 event is that there's a federal coordinator appointed. And the job of that federal coordinator, and in our case that's Alex Koo, who's a special agent in charge of Homeland Security investigations in St. Paul. His job is to muster up federal resources that are brought forth to our community to help us out over that 10-day period of time at no cost to us, local jurisdictions. Now, I will tell you that in this case, this will be the largest deployment of federal personnel and resources in the history of Super Bowls. So we are very grateful for that because, frankly, we need the help, but those resources will be a tremendous asset to us to keep everybody safe throughout the metro area. And these are our major public safety partners. Some people seem to think, well, the federal government comes in and they're in charge. They are not. They are a support agency. All command and control and all authority for security and safety as it relates to the Super Bowl rests with local authorities. So in the case of Bloomington and things going on, it's these two gentlemen right here in the Bloomington Police Department that is in charge of everything related to security. Minneapolis, that's Minneapolis, St. Paul, it's St. Paul. And we're all working together in one unified command structure. Think of it almost like a metro-wide police department in some aspects over 10 days. Because we'll have resources that we can shift around if need be. If things are going crazy at the Mall of America, we can move resources over there and vice versa to help things out. And so these are the major law enforcement partners and other partners to include the Minnesota National Guard who will be providing assistance to us. They typically have done this in other Super Bowls as well. And they come in and help us with things like force protection around some of the perimeters, traffic control posts, security at some of our command posts, and really things that alleviate the need for us having to put an officer standing 24/7 on a post when I can have a National Guard trooper standing by and freeing up those police officers for other associated duties. So we're very thankful to all of our law enforcement partners that have really put these plans together. This is a list of all the law enforcement agencies. We have signed agreements with each of these law enforcement agencies listed, and each of these agencies, there's, if you include Minneapolis, 60 in total, that will be sending us police officers for up to 10 days over this period of time. And those officers will be working in Minneapolis, in Bloomington, in St. Paul, and other areas where we have Super Bowl events and venues taking place. So as you can see, this is a pretty vast list. It goes as far north as Ely, and as far south as Rochester, as far west as basically the South Dakota border, Big Stone County, and just a sample of those agencies. So putting all of that together has been a real challenge for us because our community still is not that big. You look at Houston last year at the Super Bowl. They have 5,200 police officers alone on the Houston Police Department. So they peel off 1,000, they got it pretty well handled, right? Well, we don't have that luxury. So we're taking 3 from here, 4 from there. Now, that's a great partnership that we have, and we're now in the process of everybody there has their Super Bowl schedules. They know where they're working, who they are working for. And this week at Minneapolis Convention Center, we'll be doing some orientation training sessions with the officers from those agencies to know what to expect, to meet their respective incident commanders. So there'll be folks from Bloomington Police Department there talking with some of these officers, orientating them to the Mall of America or to the team hotels, wherever they might be helping out. We really see it as a positive to really highlight what we believe is a very professional law enforcement partnership and really highlight that law enforcement partnership throughout the state of Minnesota. So a very big endeavor. Next. So when we did the planning for this, I mentioned it started 2 years out, really 18 months we've been going hard. We put together 7 different planning branches because I've been talking a lot about police and public safety, but really public safety is a lot more than that. It's fire, EMS, emergency management, public health, radio communications, in addition to police. So all of those fit within 7 different planning branches, and we've been meeting initially monthly, and lately it's been every 2 weeks with groups. And you can go to the next slide. 41 different resource planning groups. So everything you see up here represents a group of people who have been getting together for 18 plus months that have put together an operational plan in some capacity to support Super Bowl 52. As you can see, it's got a wide range of things covered up there and just a high level of detail. One of the big challenges for people like me is to making sure that all these are not being done in a vacuum, meaning this group is not just planning on their own without talking to this group or that group, but that they're all communicating and working under the same assumptions. I like to tell people the easiest part of this, I believe, will be the 10-day event period. All the plans are done now. It was getting to this spot and getting all these people together to meet, to coordinate, to come up with plans, and making sure all those plans gel and mesh together. Now that those plans are set, we look forward to exercising those plans. These are kind of the phases that we started in back in the really spring of 2016, going through drafting plans. We started writing plans in this past spring and really finalized those plans in the fall. We've staffed the entire event, so every police officer working anywhere knows exactly when they're working, where they're working, what they're going to be doing. That's given us some time to do some training. We've done a number of different tabletop scenarios. The chief mentioned we need to be prepared for anything. So we've been talking about, well, what would we do if there was a terrorist incident? What would we do if there's a weather emergency? It could be frigid cold, could be 2 feet of snow. We really have had to and tried to think of every possible contingency and come up with a plan to try to address that, many of which don't necessarily involve police, but public works, snow plows, transportation, weather, etc. And so now we're getting very close to go time. This is just some estimated attendance numbers looking back at Houston and what they saw. Just to kind of back up the type of numbers that we're talking about. The NFL Live, which is what I talked about on Nicollet Mall, NFL Experience. The game itself, yeah, that's one day. 66,000 people in the case of US Bank Stadium. And then you have other events like Nomadic Live down here. So I'm sure you heard about the Prior Lake and Mystic Lake Casino hosting Club Nomadic down there. That's a private event. That is not a Super Bowl event, but Prior Lake Police Chief Mark Elliott has been working with us, and we've been talking with him as well. So primarily all the response plans I'm talking about are primarily for those official Super Bowl events, but there's dozens, actually hundreds of other large events, private events that come to town, each of which has a transportation and traffic component and a security component. A lot of that's being done by off-duty police officers in Minneapolis or paid time and a half officers in Bloomington. So we not only have to consider those official events, but the impact of all those private events taking place. Basically, every venue throughout the metro area is booked with something related to Super Bowl. Some of the challenges we've had to face, the budget, the NFL doesn't pay for a ton. Most of all of the funding for this, the party itself as well as the public safety operation, comes from the Minnesota Super Bowl Host Committee, who it sounds like gave you a presentation previously. So in the case of public safety, the money that we have really is going to offset those extraordinary expenses, police overtime, things that aren't already within our budget. In the case of Minneapolis Police, most of our officers, this is their assignment for that period of time, and we'll only get reimbursed for any overtime that they incur, whereas we have to reimburse other agencies from outstate Minnesota 100% for all of their time, because they don't have a dog in the fight otherwise, but we do, Bloomington does, but all those other agencies are coming in and we have to pay for their cost of their salary. So that's kind of the budget has been a big challenge, remains to be a challenge. Staffing, we talked a little bit about that and the differences between Houston and Minneapolis. Space, I'll show you some slides on that in a minute, but a lot of our stuff is really focused in an urban environment. Weather, most Super Bowls are not in a cold weather environment. That has an impact not only on the visitors, but if you think about police officers standing outside for 10, 12, 14 hours, we have to take that in consideration. Where are they going to get warm? How are they going to stay warm? All of those things. And then transportation and traffic, the remote screenings with the light rail trains, a wrinkle that hasn't been tried in other Super Bowls. We talked a little bit about the private events. Those pose a challenge. We're just learning of some of those events now. And then thinking about this right now, we're kind of in logistics mode. Where are all these police officers going to park? How are they going to eat? We talked about keeping them warm. 2,000 plus, we're closer to 3,000 now. And just putting all those logistics together to deploy an army of public safety officers throughout the metro is extremely challenging. And then command and control and coordination, making sure everybody knows who's in charge of what and where. We have a multi-agency command center, as I think I mentioned, where we'll have representatives from each of those agencies involved. We've done this before, but making sure we have that command and control covered. And then the constantly changing threat environment that's out there, terrorism threats. What's happened just in the last couple of months? Las Vegas, you have these vehicle intrusions and ramming attacks. These are all things that we look at our plans. What could we change? How could we do things better to reduce the risk that might be out there? Space. There's US Bank Stadium, surrounded completely by largely private buildings, HCMC, and private parking lots. You compare that, if you will, to the next, that's Houston. Downtown is way off in the distance, but Houston was built for a Super Bowl, in my opinion. They have the Energy Stadium, the Astrodome sits vacant, and then acres and acres of parking lots, all surrounded by a nice security fence. So for the Super Bowl, it's a great spot to have it. I hope they go back there. Next. This is just looking out of one side of Energy Stadium. And you see Houston, downtown Houston in the background. But all of the stuff in the foreground here, all of that has to fit inside or immediately outside US Bank Stadium. 4 sides of that has to fit there. And if you have a chance now, go downtown because it's transforming as we speak. There's concrete being placed, there's barriers going up, major structures. You will not largely recognize portions of downtown Minneapolis when this thing rolls in. And it's a tremendous amount of work for those folks that have to put all that together. And the complication, of course, is the Vikings. They also transform the inside of US Bank Stadium, which they cannot do until either the Vikings are eliminated or to win the NFC Championship. And the outside of the stadium, they're doing as much as they can right now, understanding we have a game this Sunday, and most certainly we'll have a home game the following Sunday, right? Yeah. Next. This is just the halftime show last year at Houston. Thousands of people bringing in all the stuff for the halftime show and then taking it back out. This year we have Justin Timberlake. Last year it was Lady Gaga. All that has to go in and out in about 14 minutes. So that alone is a big choreography session of trying to do that. We don't have to deal with that, they do, but just shows you some of the logistics of putting on a Super Bowl. We talked about threats. You're going to see a lot of concrete barriers around, not just protecting the perimeter, but in places like Nicollet Mall where we'll have a ton of pedestrian walking back and forth. And some of those intersections on Nicollet will still have cross traffic. Having said that, we're going to put a lot of cement pyramids and or these barriers in areas where people will congregate, because even if you'd set aside the threat of an intentional vehicle intrusion or ramming, it's wintertime. People slip around. We don't want an accident to take place. So we'll be doing whatever we can to try to mitigate that by the use of things like concrete barriers. Some of that I would imagine to also see here around the Mall of America and some of the team hotels. Some of the operational considerations, I'm not going to go into that, but all of those are kind of major issues that we've had to kind of deal with. To generally things you can expect, 10 days, very high visibility law enforcement presence. Having said that, we really want that to be a very friendly and approachable presence. Yes, those officers will be alert, vigilant, but just because there's hundreds of them around, we don't want to scare people. Go up. These officers have time to interact with residents, with visitors, and we are telling them the same thing. We want them to be highly interactive and really showcase our professional law enforcement partnership. Some frequently asked questions. Again, we've engaged the private sector through our downtown security executive group. That's both downtown Minneapolis. I know they've reached out now to Bloomington as well, so that if you have a major business and you want information, we can hook you up with our DSEG group, and that's information that you can bring forth to us in public safety. And if we have critical information that we want to get out to our business community, we can do so through our DSEG group. I mentioned the parking and transportation. That's a great website to go to. It will be updated. That's game day. A lot of talk about the perimeter. That's just game day around the stadium. Some of the vehicle and road closures that'll be taking place. Key planning takeaway for us has been to learn from those who have done it, and that's been extremely beneficial. We've worked very closely with both of the organizations in Houston and in San Francisco. That's our Super Bowl badge. I know Bloomington Police also have a Super Bowl badge that our officers will be wearing, and I have mine on right now. Tom, do you have any questions that either Mike or I can do? Yes.
It's kind of a nerdy question, but what does your communication center look like with all these different groups and probably operating with different radio systems?
Well, yeah, that's a great question. Since 9/11, our entire state works off an Armor, 800 megahertz Armor system. So we are able to patch through using a variety of different radio talk groups, hundreds of different groups. We can make sure that all of those officers coming from all those agencies can talk to each other. I don't know how it's done, but that's a statewide system that after 9/11, and some of that was observed, that was kind of a national change, and the state of Minnesota invested heavily in that. Yes, sir.
You mentioned the Super Bowl badge. How do you deal with jurisdictional problems when police officers are coming in from all over the state? Are they temporarily sworn in as local officers?
Yeah, by virtue of them being a police officer in the state of Minnesota, they have statewide jurisdiction as long as they are working under our direction. So we do have a formalized joint powers agreement. So each of those agreements was signed off by the city council or county board of those respective agencies, as well as us in Minneapolis. So that's the legal authority we have. So, yes, questions?
I know you probably have a lot of increased security at the airport because you're going to have a lot of people coming and going. Is TSA by any chance going to do increased screening of people flying into Minneapolis?
Well, they will have increased number of agents. I don't know that.
I'm saying like if someone's leaving from, let's say, Germany and flying to Minneapolis, are they going to have increased security from those people trying to come into the country? Or from even another state coming in? And so TSA at the beginning, instead of waiting till they get here, checking more.
Yeah, I don't honestly know the answer to that question, sir.
I was, the chief from the airport police department, he's attended many of these meetings, and their event is obviously not the game, it's the inbound and outbound traffic. So to that point, they've spent a lot of time ensuring that those people are properly scanned and properly vetted before they come in. And at the same time, after the game, their Super Bowl isn't Sunday, their Super Bowl is Monday, because it's going to be by a factor of 5, the busiest day at the airport. Not the busiest, 5 times the busiest day that they've ever had, is what they're projecting. So they are up to their eyeballs beyond.
I know they're ready for it, and I will give you an observation. We flew back the day after the Super Bowl from Houston. These guys were with me. It's the quickest I have ever been through TSA. They had every TSA agent probably in the country and every gate agent working. It was literally 2 minutes. I was like, are you kidding me? This is awesome. I wish it was like this every day. So believe me, they will be prepared. Yes, sir.
What's the brainstorming process? Not a fun process, I would imagine, but all those ideas of what if this happens, what if that happens? What kind of process do you go through to try to anticipate the unanticipated?
Well, you try to look at the event or the venue that you're dealing with, and then you do some walkthroughs. You talk about what could happen. What if a building falls down? What if somebody blows out a window, a sniper situation like Las Vegas? And you look at what plans do we have in place? How can we change those to be more effective? There's no way any of us can prevent anything. Or we can prevent a lot, but not every possible contingency. Who would have ever thought prior to Las Vegas that that would happen? And I don't think anybody right now has a good solution to that. But there will be a lot of assets in place ready to very quickly address those types of scenarios. So we won't have to call up, hey, where's those SWAT guys? Let's call them in. No, they will be there on site in force, both visible and non-visible, to address some of those tactical types of scenarios. Anything you want to add there?
Yes, sir. What is Bloomington got any contingency plans for some disruptions, people who are protesting and engaging in other kinds of fun activities?
Yeah, we do. It's kind of built on your question, and to answer that, what we'll rely on is what's worked for us in the past. Obviously, Bloomington has had experience with protests in the past with the Mall of America. I think those operational plans went well. We learned from each one, put us in a better position today. Yeah, we realize that obviously with a high number of people that will be utilizing light rail to get down to the game, there is an attractiveness to potential protesters to disrupt that. We'll have measures in place to try to keep that from happening in Bloomington, as Minneapolis will do it on their end. But like the commander said, you just, as far as building a contingency plan, we can't prevent everything, but what we can do is make sure that we're not scratching our head when something falls at our feet, and now what do we do with this? We got to know what we're going to do with it. We need to know everything from, 7 inches of snow, which could have a big impact on getting people around, to a protest where all of a sudden there's debris on the light rail tracks, and we've worked through most of it, but I think I speak for Scott. When I'm not working, I'm usually thinking of things that we haven't covered yet, and I go to work that next morning, and we start sketching things out. So,
To just add just a little bit what Mike's talking about when we talk about kind of developing the plan, we don't typically have a SWAT contingent on duty 24/7 here in Bloomington. We rely on them to come in when we need them. We're going to proactively have SWAT 24/7 during the Super Bowl period. They're going to be on duty. They're not going to be coming from home. They're going to have groups in St. Paul and Minneapolis doing the same thing. And so if it's an incident, a terror incident, our folks from our SWAT team will be within minutes away. We're also going to have, at any given time, dozens and dozens, if not up over 100 officers in and around Mall of America. When I say dozens, that's the wee hours of the morning, but when that place is busy. Unlike a typical Saturday afternoon where we may have 10 or 15, we'll have literally probably over 100. And so we've got people where we need them. We're ready. There's another group of about there's at least 100 people that are going to be stationed wherever they need to be to respond to a protest. That's in addition to what we already have on site. So within minutes, you'll have the 250-person units from a protest standpoint. That's a pretty good sized group of police officers. So they're going to be ready to come in. We've tabletopped just about every scenario that we can think of. Our officers today are in training for another 10-hour training day, just preparing for what might happen during the Super Bowl. We're walking through those plans again. Just, you know, and also all along trying to kind of come up with what are other scenarios that we're not thinking about. And not a week goes by where you don't come up with at least another one. What are we going to do if this happens? So if nothing else, we prepared ourselves well for just about anything that could happen. So even if it doesn't happen at the Super Bowl and happens somewhere else, we've done a lot of work to get ready for, you know, whatever kind of crazy things might come our way.
Okay, let's just take the one more question and then.
How about the medical facilities? Are they prepared contingency plans or expanded capacity, room spaces and so forth?
Yeah, especially HCMC, because they're in such close proximity. But I just got a call this morning from the Minnesota Hospital Association. And they've been working not just at HCMC, but throughout the metro area and statewide on what would be the impacts of moving patients around. There's only so many hospital beds out there. So God forbid something bad happen, or, you know, what have we seen lately? Flu epidemic. And so we got to make sure that we have enough beds to address that. The good news is these folks do this every day already and shift beds around, move ambulance services around. This has the potential to be a lot larger than that. And they've been working just as we have to try to fine tune those plans. What if something happens here? How do we very quickly move patients to alternate facilities? So they have had a very aggressive plan in place to try to deal with that.
Well, thank you very, very much.
Thanks.